Today on the PIO podcast, we'd like to introduce Director of Marketing and Media Design, Juliet Casey from Los Medanos College in Pittsburgh, California. Welcome to the show, Juliet.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, Juliet, could you tell our listeners about your background?
Sure. So I come from a hard news background. So I bring newsroom sensibility to my role and definitely try to convey as much of that, being fair, accurate, thorough, and timely, urgency and immediacy to my work. I think that's just the best way to approach being a PIO.
Absolutely. So, as a you were a video journalist, or a news journalist, or a print.
Print, yeah, definitely.
Okay. So, as a print journalist, as you started your career, how did you handle that transition to being on the other side of having people shoving microphones into your face?
So actually, the preparation is really similar to preparing for a news story. So I didn't find the transition too jarring, and I had been in a rather competitive news market. So, for 10 years or so, I was shoulder to shoulder with those TV people, and I knew them very well. So I didn't have maybe that deer in headlights experience that maybe others might have had if they came from a smaller news market, then suddenly having the flash of lights. That part was not too bad. But honestly, it was like it took a lot of the same preparation, checking the facts, making sure that you have everything up to date. I will say, in some ways, I was surprised that it was a little more work. To be honest, it was a little eye opening how often you have to go and then, do your part of it and then do a lot of extra homework for the subject matter experts or your elected official to make sure that they, really own the information and come across confident. So I think prepping them sometimes was as much work as like if I could just do it myself. But you don't always want to be the messenger, and that I learned as well. So you don't
Right.
know. Sometimes if you're out there a little too much, your audience starts to wonder, like, well, why didn't the mayor just say that?
Exactly, exactly. It's funny that I had supervisors when I was in law enforcement that used to say, "Oh, you just go talk to the cameras for 5 minutes. That's not much work." Not knowing I'm providing background information, talking points to staff, and preparing information sheets and stuff, and fielding 700 calls on a major incident or something that might happen and emails. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm only talking for 5 minutes.
Yeah, those 5 minutes though, they can sting.
Oh yeah. So I didn't ask you this before. I should have asked this. Where is Los Medanos College located at in general?
Okay, so Los Medanos College is in Pittsburgh, California. So we're what you might describe as East Bay. It's in Contra Costa County. So we're about an hour east of San Francisco for context, but we're a little bit further inland. We also have a campus in Brentwood, California. So that's another 30 minutes further inland. And it's a little bit more rural and has sort of kind of like a more agricultural background, but it's growing. So yeah, I would argue we're probably in one of the prettiest parts of Northern California. I love it
That's
here.
good to that's good to know. That's excellent. So in your position as the director of marketing and media design, how many people do you supervise in your office?
Only two. We are small but mighty. I have a senior website administrator and a graphic designer.
Okay, so yeah, they're doing a lot then, an awful lot.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We do quite a bit, but we're very good at recruiting partners and stakeholders to, chip in, give us ideas, and be our guinea pigs at times. We try to be the fun department to work with.
That's good to know. And that's true because most marketing or public information and public affairs offices are usually staffed so poorly they can barely get by with what they need, and so you got to learn how to, I always call it, beg, borrow, and steal from other people. Sometimes that's the way it works.
Yeah,
But
flattery
yeah, partners.
goes a long way.
Yes, it does. What social media platforms are you guys currently utilizing there?
Primarily Instagram and Facebook, YouTube quite a bit. So anytime we develop a video that's going to go out to we have some partnerships with like Xfinity and Telemundo, but we always try to, repurpose our videos as much as possible. So Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube are primary. And then in limited ways, we use TikTok. California doesn't really like public agencies to use TikTok a lot, but we do sometimes.
You almost have to sometimes. I mean, it just is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
All right, so you had brought this up before. You are a proponent of being accurate, timely, fair, even if those challenges are in presenting that information to address a problem or could occur. Where'd that come from and why?
I think deep in my bones, I never stopped being a journalist or really feeling that our country deserves the best, whether you're in a small town or a big city or in Washington. Fundamentally, in the public sector, we work for the people. It's a privileged position. And we have a duty to be accountable. So, from top level executives to people who work in the fast food joint down the road, some portion of their paycheck goes into mine. And I really take that to heart. As much as sharing an accomplishment goes a long way for your reputation and brand, being honest about the challenges really gives people a stake in your mission. And they can only make good decisions and they can only help your institution if they have the right information. And you know this from public safety to budget situations, delaying the truth only makes everything worse and diminishes and tarnishes your reputation. So, I've worked with elected officials, I've worked with top level education administrators, and down the line, I feel like I've made a good case for just ripping the band aid off and telling people how it is. And very often, sometimes to their surprise, people come to your side and want to help you.
It's so true. Every time I've seen organizations attempt to sidestep, or I don't want to use the word cover up, but sugarcoat too much, it always backfires in the long run. I mean, it's sometimes it's so obvious that it's going to happen, and you would think that they would listen to the communications professionals, but so many times they push them aside and they say, yeah, we're going to do it our way, and not listen to your advice. And that's an unfortunate thing that when that happens.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in my career. It's not always an easy sell. One of the things that I've done is, probably one of the challenges is getting your top people to carve out the time. And they're pulled in a million different directions. They're making decisions large and small, and you're asking them to give you like really focused attention to learn how to communicate about a situation, and they really just want to like be working on it and not have to talk to people who they don't feel maybe are directly involved, but they are involved, they live here, they study here, they occupy whatever the service is. So sometimes that has been more the challenge, is just really carving out their time and then having a really concise way of saying, like, here's the plan, here's the talking points, here's the up to date information. And then sometimes you even have to do a little bit of role playing if it's not second nature to them to go on camera. Some people are natural, that you don't have to do a lot of prep work with them. But ultimately, like I say, I've been very fortunate that my leadership has often been very receptive and they want to get it right.
Outstanding. Juliet, let's talk about your experience with community engagement. You learned something about that yourself when you first started doing it. What was it?
Well, there's so many things. I think people, what I found is people really appreciate talking to sources directly. They want to hear it from the horse's mouth and coming away with information that gives them agency. I think it has been really, really satisfying in a way that you don't always see from wearing the journalist hat when you're out there working on a problem with people. When you see that how empowering that level of engagement can be, and you see people take what they've learned and then take action. And sometimes that comes from, like, borrowing little mottos that we come up with along the way, and then you see corporate partners or other community partners kind of say, like, yeah, well, we're on that boat with them, and we're also advocating for X. That's really satisfying.
It's go keep going. No, I love it. Keep going.
It's okay. I think one thing that I've learned about community engagement too is it's a little addictive. When I went from being a PIO into the private sector, I had some clients you might consider like luxury clients, and in Vegas you can imagine what those might be. And
Hmm.
um, it was really a challenge for me to not continually steer them into causes and nonprofits. And I think it was like really good for their image, but it didn't always like sell more product. I can't say my work in that sense was necessarily good for business, but I definitely learned that I love the community engagement part of the job. So I'm just really lucky I found my way back to the public sector.
And I think a lot of public information officers enjoy the community engagement side of it more than probably anything else. Whenever we can, storytelling is such a big thing with me. Whenever we can tell stories and interact with the community about something good that they've done or something good that staff have interacted with them, those are the most fun things for me, and always happen.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, Juliet, let's talk about when you transitioned, because you brought it up. You transitioned from a PIO into marketing. How did that transition go?
So, not to be redundant, but I don't think it was hard to do like the messaging and, I did a lot of what they call promotional or advertorial content at times. And so you know, would be like, well, I don't know how much I can say about, hand stitched leather interior and alloy wheels and well appointed this and that fancy car. So I did things like profiles of their concierge and told like his bootstrap story to now he's, concierging these luxury vehicles and things like that. And they got a lot of engagement, putting a human face to the car dealership, if you will.
Mhm.
And they were in a sense a favorite client of mine, but yeah, the I think the bump in the road I continually was hitting is wanting to somehow get our big corporate clients to share the wealth, if you will. Use their power for good and all that. And they're like, we just really want to sell more cars. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that's always tough when you're the numbers, the cash is what drives everything.
Yeah, but I mean, they were all very good people. I have to say, I always loved all my clients. It's just, the agency always wants more clients and more money, and
Oh yeah.
totally understand. I mean, it's my bread and butter. I should care as much about it, but ultimately, that's not what's in my bones.
And that's why you're in the public sector again.
Yes.
So let's talk about recruitment and engagement for a community college. I think it probably is about as challenging as it would be for some law enforcement officers to recruit police officers now, law enforcement agencies to recruit police officers. Can we discuss on how or what you do to engage students and the community?
Well, funny you should mention law enforcement. We had a huge campaign actually, and it's still running. We created some ads, some video ads to run on multiple platforms, really recruiting for our Administration of Justice program, which essentially trains police officers. And we have a partnership with Contra Costa County in how that program is structured. So it is a huge need, and political forces being what they are, it's not as appealing maybe a line of work as it may have been in the past. And there's especially in California, there's just umpteen issues that police deal with. They're not just chasing cops and robbers kind of thing. There's a lot of social ills that they are called on to address. So we see the need in our community, and as a community college we are really trying to be part of the solution and recruiting men and women who reflect the community as much as possible, who have a heart for the work but could also get the skills and the wherewithal that they're going to need to be successful, to be safe, to um, really foster that peace and tranquility in the community that we all really desire. So the challenge, I think, is sometimes getting the message out to the people who are receptive to it and for whom it's relevant. So sometimes you don't know that you're looking for a new job until you come across our message not once but twice but 7 times. A lot of what we do is really an integrated approach. We can't be one and done with a radio ad or a TV spot. We have bus sides rolling, we have billboards going, we have digital and connected TV ads rolling. So we try to really layer everything as much as possible and try to find people where they are and try to find the right people. And that's quite often the challenge as well. One of the areas in public safety that we struggle with trying to fill seats in, again, attracting, for example, women to some of these public safety jobs. For some reason, they're not seeing themselves in that role, or they don't know that that's a possibility for them, even if they have the capability and the desire to give back in some way, they haven't found that pathway. So we're really trying to, you know, build and solidify, you know, a road to success through those programs, and again help our community fill those much needed positions.
Right, right. And you brought up the hitting them from multiple different avenues, different mediums, and so on. And I'm always reminded about those simple commercials where you see it's like you probably didn't have this out by you, but it was Empire Carpet Company that used to advertise here in Chicago, and it was everybody that's from Chicago can recite the phone number by heart because they've heard it so many times. And I think it's 7 or 8 times that it's said in the commercial itself, besides you seeing it on every image that they show. So it's one of those things that, and again, repetition's important because just seeing it is not necessarily going to, pique someone's interest, but hearing it and then reading about it and then re-seeing it, and then maybe they're caught in a mood where they're more receptive than they would have been prior seeing an ad. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very important to continue to do that. And I think that's the one thing that some of my colleagues in law enforcement struggle to do. They'll put out their holiday safety message once or twice, but they don't ever change the image and change the perception of it or just the graphics of it. And you end up, oh, I saw that already, I don't really care. And they forget how our attention spans have gone down to almost zero
Yeah.
nowadays, and we have to consider that when we're trying to market to them.
Yeah, that's very true. Now, I will say even all of that though does not have the impact or will not get folks in the door until they meet somebody. I mean, word of mouth is still super critical. And we work really closely with our outreach and recruitment team. So, like tabling, being in the Christmas parade, being you know, available when like Rotary Club does their job fair, all these things. We try to be really present as much as possible. And like I say, we're small but scrappy, and we do a lot of, I guess you could say, like volunteer work. I mean, we're not always paid for every minute that we're in the cause, if you will, but we take a lot of pride in that. And I think that the more people see that we as employees or faculty really care and we're not just transactional.
Oh my God, it's so important. That's so important. You have to have that empathy that comes through, and if it doesn't, it's lost. It's so quickly lost with people.
Yeah, and what's really nice, so we just celebrated our 50th anniversary just this year, and we did a lot of outreach related to that. We did a whole microsite where people could post their memories, and it went gangbusters. It was really heartwarming how many people remember fondly their time at LMC, where they got their start, where they, you know, did the good work they needed to do to get to that 4-year institution, their dream school, if you will. And we were maybe just a step along the way, but when we opened it up for that kind of feedback, it was impressive. It was like, you know, people quote unquote raise their families here, and we have had, like, since the very beginning, an early childhood education program. So the faculty and students with little ones could bring their kids to school with them, and the people taking care of their kids are learning how to be educators. So it's like a really beautiful symbiotic thing that happens here. And in fact, one of my colleagues has his little girl here, and she's about to turn, I think she just turned 2. So I mean, we love it when, you know, he says, "Oh, I'm going to pick her up early and come by," and she says hi to everybody. And so you do get this real community feel, intergenerational, and you know, that's, I think, the stuff that really will stand out. And they might have forgotten, but now they have a kid who's getting ready to graduate high school, and they start seeing our ads, and then they see us in the parade, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got to get them in there." So we're hoping
Awesome.
it has that snowball effect.
That's excellent. That's excellent. What do you believe your biggest challenge is in your current job?
So I would say there's actually two big ones. One is actually persuading that prospective student to enroll. Like the time is now. You have a chance. We have free tuition for full-time students. It's an incredible opportunity.
Wow.
And we will do everything we can. We've got excellent wraparound services, and it's just, you know, really getting that message to penetrate and get them in the door. That's still a bit of a challenge. and then getting our news out in a timely way with, I would say, we I mean, it's a state of affairs everywhere. We have diminishing news outlets, and people, it's always kind of a guessing game where people are going to get their news. So when we expanded our free tuition program, I think it was a little bit of a challenge. Like, it was, people were a little slow on the uptick, if you will, especially coming out of COVID. But we're seeing gains. We're seeing that we're making strides. Of the 3 colleges in our region, we did actually move the needle a bit more than our counterparts. So a little point of pride.
Awesome. That's outstanding. I have a question that I'm going to ask that was not on the list, but it might be relative. What are your thoughts about utilizing AI in your current position?
Ooh, it's a little bit. I'm trying to get my mind around it a little bit. I'm thinking it's kind of like Google on steroids. Like, I don't know that in our work AI could like replace a PIO. Like, it's a kind of like a reference, like you're going to ask it questions to, give you some kind of feedback, but I don't think it's there yet. I mean, it might in some future time be a robot or something. I hope not. But I really think that our ability to critically think in the moment through a situation is not something that AI right now is going to be capable of doing. If you need to, like a little brainstorming partner or something, it might be good in that way. From the graphics perspective, I think it's, again, similarly, something that you can, hone your own ideas on. We're, as an institution, writing policies about, like, what's fair, how we use it. The bottom line, and people don't really talk about it this way, but the whole notion of AI, to me, and this is me being old school coming up through print, it's kind of like a giant plagiarism machine. Like, if you actually take it, it's really not your own. So I have some trepidation with how we use it. Like, you could read a book and be inspired by some idea you get from the book, but you can't give that book and say, I wrote this book. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's got its merits, and we just have to get comfortable with how to use it as a tool, as opposed to expecting it to somehow replace all of our work, like all of, our work product.
I agree. And one of the things that I found interesting was Chada Spikes, who was the communications, the director of public affairs for the Atlanta Police Department, said when I asked her the similar question, her comment was, "It'll never replace us because it doesn't have heart intelligence. It doesn't have that ability to have empathy. It doesn't have that ability to feel what that story is going to do or impact the public." And I think that heart intelligence, that was a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and I actually saw that podcast, and I almost stood up and applauded. She had a real compelling way to convey that, I thought, for
Yeah,
sure.
she really did. Yeah, she was outstanding. Yeah, that's why I love interviewing all you guys, because I learned so much from everybody. Juliet, is there a question I should have asked? And if so, how would you have answered it?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot of ground in a really short time. I mean, I think if I had a parting sentiment, it would just be, we with everything that's going on in the world and in the media, I would say more than ever, our work is super important, and we have to hold ourselves to that highest standard of being fair, accurate, thorough, and accountable. So that's just something that, the private sector, the fourth estate, hasn't on its own kind of found a way to do that. So it's my hope that folks in positions like ours can really hold the line and really help sort of manage up, if you will, and help our leaders embrace that philosophy.
Absolutely. Let's do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Here we go. Texting or talking?
Oof. Talking.
Movies or books?
Books.
Coffee, tea, or energy drink?
Coffee.
Adult drink of choice?
Beer.
What would be your superpower if you could have one?
Telepathy.
Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Ooh, I think sometimes forgiveness.
What place would you most like to travel to?
Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe.
Oh, that's very specific. I like that. What's your favorite way to relax after a long day?
Dancing with my husband.
If you could choose to have coffee with any historical figure, living or dead, who would it be?
La Malinche.
Okay, you got to tell me who that is.
So she is akin to the Sacagawea of Mexico. She was the interpreter for Cortez and his people as they went through Mexico.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. What key points would you like our listeners to take from today's interview?
Key takeaways again, just folks be fair, accurate, thorough, accountable. Do your best to paint the most accurate picture possible for people to make good decisions.
Awesome. As we wrap up, is there a piece of wisdom or a motto that you live by?
My motto. So this came from a soccer coach once upon a time. You have to have a vision, you have to make a decision, and then execute with precision. So vision, decision, precision.
I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
How could people best reach you if they want to connect or follow up or maybe go to school there?
Ooh, okay. So check out our website, www.losmedanos.edu. And there you'll find all my contact information, Juliet Casey in marketing.
Juliet, thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. So I'm really happy to have been here.
Thank you.